I am so excited about this episode of Back and Brew because we are actually going to engage with someone who is extremely divisive. And I wouldn't even say divisive. He stirs the pot on LinkedIn specifically because he takes on rep scrubs. On this episode, we have Dr. Brian Blackwood of Boulder, Colorado, who is an orthopedic surgeon specializing in total joints. This is Back and Brew. Dr. Blackwood, thanks for coming on. Brian Blackwood of Boulder Center for Orthopaedics. Thanks for joining us today on Back and Brew. I know even though you're not a spine surgeon, what we're going to talk about today is definitely applicable for any spine rep, ortho rep. I would say anyone that has any kind of ownership in the surgical healthcare community. First thing I'm going to jump into, though, is the brew that you brought, which is from the Coffee Ride in Boulder. And it's like right down the street from you guys. Can you just kind of give me just a quick overview of what it is?
Yeah, so this is a little local coffee shop started by a guy who was just trying to make some coffee in his office, and it got super popular, and he's mixed with the idea a little bit and decided to start his own coffee shop. And so it's a very unique taste, very unique flavors to bring the fruit forward without the sour. And it's great. It's right next to the office, so we can go over there and check it out. So it's nice to support a local business like that.
Awesome. That's a Coffee Ride in Boulder, Colorado. Awesome. Well, I'm going to pour some of this. I definitely am a coffee fiend. It's funny. My wife won't if she won't drink coffee past like noon, it can be 6 o'clock at night and I'll still be like, maybe I need just a little bit of coffee. I'm going to pour this.
Yeah, I'm similar. I have the 3 or 4 cups a day, and it doesn't really matter what time of day it is. Usually I'm ready to go to sleep about an hour afterwards. So
do you have kids?
I do. I have 5 children.
Oh, okay.
4 boys and a girl.
So yeah, your coffee doesn't stand a chance in your house for you trying to stay awake. I get it.
Got to take any chance I can to get some sleep. So a busy household.
And this one's actually it's like a peanut butter and jelly or peanut butter and jam type of coffee. It's a mix of two. It's like a Brazilian one, apparently, is what they were kind of telling me that when I was reading on the bag anyway, there was like some mix between two.
Oh, nice.
But yeah,
be a new one.
Yeah.
Right.
Cheers.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I can get behind any kind of coffee.
No, that's good.
It's good. As long as it's not burnt, I'm good.
Exactly.
So tell me a little about yourself. You're an orthopedic surgeon. What do you specialize in Boulder?
Yeah, so I'm an orthopedic surgeon specialized in hip and knee replacements in Boulder, Colorado. Very technology forward. Was early in the robot assisted surgery phase for hips and knees. Brought that to Boulder 12 years ago now when I moved here. So that's kind of where the start was. And then now with technology, now we're moving to sort of outpatient surgery and doing more in surgery centers and getting patients home the same day. Really just continuing to try to work and refine it so it's not such a daunting thing for the patients to have to go through, because they are big surgeries, not spine surgeries, but they're big surgeries.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's funny. I heard someone say one time, especially even as a rep, I look at it like, you see enough surgery and enough patients that it kind of becomes like not that big of a deal for each individual surgery. And then like there's we operated recently on an access surgeon that works with one of our spine surgeons. And even being that close to it, I'm like, oh man, this is a big deal. And I heard this saying that once was, every surgery is a small surgery until it's your surgery. And that's how I think it kind of goes sometimes. But so tell me, how long have you been a surgeon?
So I've been a surgeon since I guess officially started residency in 2006. So that's when I graduated med school. Did residency at the University of New Mexico in Albuquerque. Focused a lot of trauma there. Actually, not as many joints, but kind of crazy joints from all over the state would end up in Albuquerque, and so we take care of a lot of complicated patients that way. Ended up then going and doing a fellowship out in Napa Valley in St. Helena, California. Actually stayed there and practiced for a year. And then I actually grew up in Montana, and my family, my mom and my grandparents lived in Longmont, and I used to come down in the summers. So when there was an opening in Boulder, it was something I couldn't turn down, and an option to come down. And they didn't ever have a fellowship trained joint person in Boulder until we got there. So it was a great opportunity to help shore that up. And they were doing maybe 400 joint replacements a year before I got there, and now we're pushing like 1,400 just at the hospital with another few hundred at the surgery centers that are going on. So the volume has increased dramatically. And it just helps us help more patients and help the community.
Wow. Would If you were a patient, would you rather have surgery in a hospital or in a surgery center?
I think in a surgery center for sure, as long as you're healthy enough to do that. Not everybody's going to be healthy enough to do that, but when you're in the surgery center, it's just orthopedics that's going on. It's just focused on those particular surgeries. They're experts in that, and it's a little bit of kind of like a boutique concierge type thing. I mean, you're the only people there. You're the only patients there, so the nursing staff's very focused on you. We've had great reviews, especially we just opened up a facility in Broomfield, and right next to I-25 by the Children's Hospital up there. And that's been getting great reviews from the patients who, maybe don't want to drive outside of Boulder, but by the time they get there and the staff takes great care of them and they see they can get in and out and it's not that far from Boulder to drive to Broomfield, they have a great experience out there.
So you're obviously very busy if you're doing that kind of volume. And again, thanks for coming in today. Uh, so kind of where our paths intersect, and really what got me interested is I saw some posts from you on LinkedIn around rep scrubs, and kind of more so what was more interesting, what really made me reach out to you was that you kind of called out the demonization or the otherizing of reps in facilities. Um, I guess my biggest thing is when I first kind of saw it, I was like, why does this guy care?
Well, that's a good question. It's a very common question. And one of the reps that I work with used to actually play. I think he played like 6 games with the Avalanche or something. But he was, good hockey player. And he's like, "You're like this is like the star player coming in supporting the fourth line. Like, what are you doing? Like, why do you care about this?" I think it goes back to how I was raised. Like, I played a bunch of team sports, and when you're on the same team, you're part of the team, and you get looked out for. So I was an offensive lineman in high school, college. I know it doesn't look like it. That was many pounds ago. Um, but you worked together as a team. You didn't seek glory for yourself, and then you defended the star players, the quarterback, the running backs, the wide receivers, and the people that maybe weren't you know in the same level of strength or ability to defend themselves. And everybody was the same. So once you come in and you cross that line and you're all wearing the same uniform, you you're one of the team. And that's how we do that in Boulder. And so it was kind of eye opening for me to find out that wasn't how they do it in other places. So we don't have like even red hats. Like reps go in, change in the same scrubs I change into. They change out of them when they leave. They get laundered. They still have to go through and check into the regular sort of credentialing platform that we have at our facilities, but they're not treated like an other. And I think when you do that, it sort of undermines the value that the reps bring to healthcare in general. I mean, it's not everybody's like, oh, you're just opening a box and you're getting 25% of the implant fee. And I mean, the days of 25% commissions are long gone. The days of huge cost for implants are long gone. So the margins on these are very outdated. Everybody's cutting costs and cutting reimbursement and cutting their commissions, but the reps are still committed. So they're coming in on nights and weekends. They're coming in early. They're staying late. They're making sure all the sets are set up. When I actually started 12 years ago, the hospital wanted to circle through, circulators and scrub techs and let everybody train on what to do. And so I had to be like, okay, I need somebody who knows, and they were going to the company was going to circulate the reps too. And I was like, I need one guy, one person who's going to pay attention and know what I need to do. And then they can help train the staff. And so that's what we did. So I brought my system from, St. Helena, California, where people were coming from 80% were more than 3 hours away. We're doing hospital boards from everywhere, sort of, a bit of a concierge type practice, but we can execute that same level here now in Boulder because the reps help train the scrub techs. And then that way, if a scrub tech's sick or something, then we can put in substitute, say, okay, hey, the rep knows what's going on because it's the same rep every time. They know what instruments we want. They know how to get the setup right. They make sure all the tools are there. And so it's a double check to make sure everything's set up and ready to go. There's a lot of instruments that go into a hip or a knee replacement. And so to be able to keep track of that and keep on tap, SPD does the best they can, but it's a lot of stuff they have to clean and keep track of. And so the reps really kind of go in there and help with that, get those set up, help make sure everything's clean. So they bring a ton of value. And I think it's just demeaning and disappointing that they get treated as other or as an opportunity for sort of a cash grab to make sure they're being credentialed appropriately.
All right. So kind of tell me, and again, I 100% agree with you on this. Again, I might be biased, obviously, because I'm a spine rep too. Um, what is rep scrubs? So I'm gonna have you just kind of flesh that out for anyone that doesn't understand or fortunate enough not have it in their area.
Yeah, so definitely fortunate enough to not have it in their area. They're a company that states that their goal is to help document compliance with the vendor credentialing companies by forcing the reps to then check in and check out these pair of scrubs. So traditionally, when I walk into the locker room where they have the lockers where I can put my stuff, I select my appropriate size cloth scrubs that you see on TV everywhere. The sort of everybody knows what scrubs look like at this point. Um, the reps go to a kiosk and they have to sign up to be able to use this kiosk at $140 a year, and then they have to pay $9 per scrub set to be able to get what comes out of this little like tiny, almost like mini football thing that they break open, and then it's polypropylene, basically made out of the same fabric that the blue wraps are in the OR, to then wear these sort of paper propylene scrubs that have a void sticker in the middle, so they expire after 8 hours, even though no one else in the room changes their scrubs at 8 hours. Um, they had come with a red hat, or apparently now they have a white hat and some scrub things, but they're sort of big, bulky, tent-looking things made out of fabric that feels like the bottom of a couch, with the idea of making sure that the rep then checked in so they can track them better. Sort of like, your package arrived from FedEx. Okay, now here's where it's at. Here's who signed for it. And to better document that, even though it's a little redundant because the reps should be checking in to their other credentialing systems, Simpler and Telecentrics, the rep scrubs or rep tracks, um, Green Security, GHX, whatever of these other random companies that are there that are stacked that they have to get credentialed by. And so they wear these paper scrubs to then verify that they checked in, which is a little bit crazy. And it definitely makes them look other. They do not look like the scrubs you see on TV. They're not the ER scrubs. They're not anything you would want to see out in public wearing in any respectable manner.
So one of the spine surgeons we work with, they implemented rep scrubs in one of the hospitals, and one of our reps had to go in with it. And he just referred to him as a napkin the rest of the time. He's like, that looks like a napkin. What are you wearing? And the next question he asked was really interesting. He's like, how is that any safer than you wearing the scrubs that everyone else is wearing in here?
That's a great question. And so that was the initial thing that was told to me is, oh, this helps make sure they're wearing clean scrubs to reduce the risk of infection. Uh, Apparently, they don't claim that it reduces the risk of infection anymore. They're now backing off of that claim. But I think that still the perception is out there that somehow this is going to help. In studies, it shows the number one source of infection for a surgical case is from the patient who's having the surgery. That's where the bugs come from. That's where the problem comes from. Whether it's an inadequate prep for the days before surgery, or just that's where the bugs live, and that's the person who's absolutely closest to the surgery. Everybody else who's doing the surgery has multiple layers of protective stuff on. They've all, I wash my hands more than I can possibly imagine throughout a week, or doing cases in a day. And so that's the source. So to try to infer that the reps are increasing infection rates, or that it's safer for the patients to have them in there, is just disingenuous.
So, as a high volume orthopedic surgeon doing total joints in surgery center as well as hospital, do you think rep scrubs make a surgery any safer than what was used before?
I think they absolutely do not. And actually, I think it could be worse because they seem to tear fairly easily. So, whatever they're supposed to be protecting, which is made of the same material similar to a bunny suit, except it's softer, offers zero real protection. I wouldn't let anybody in a bunny suit come into my OR. And so the reps and everybody else needs to come to the OR and come to the hospital in their regular clothes, change into scrubs that are laundered by the facility. And then when they leave, put the scrubs in the bin, change into the regular clothes, and go home. So that helps keep everybody on the same level. Everybody's wearing the same clothes. Everybody's wearing the same level of protection and cleanliness. And then it helps you don't want to take that stuff home. Like, there are nasty things in hospitals, so you want to leave the scrubs behind. So if you're a rep who has like a stash of scrubs that you think is helpful to get in and out of places, man, burn that stuff. There's nasty bugs in there. So take it back, get it cleaned, and then just try to talk to the facilities about how do we make this work so that we're checking in the way you want, that you get in the compliance that you want, but we're able to feel like a part of the team and all wear the same uniform.
Do you feel like the hospitals how do I put this? Do you feel like the hospital's empowered rep scrubs to come in?
I think that the way that it was sold to them, or the picture that was created, and I think it's easy to make reps a target because they're a cost center. They have to pay for the implants, and so that puts a target on your back as, oh, we got to get that price down, and oh, we got to, these people are making money off of these surgeries. So is everybody else in the hospital. The surgeries are supporting the rest of the hospital. The surgeries are supporting all the people in the C-suite who are not in the OR, putting in the time and doing the work. So that's where all this money is going to, is to other people that are generating a ton of money. The hospital gets paid 10 times what I get paid to do the surgery. Yes, they pay for the implants there, but that's why they're trying to get the implant prices down. But then the rest of that money, you know, you stay overnight in a hotel and it's $150. There's a lot fancier stuff in the hotel, in the hospital, but it's like $10,000 for one night where they kind of check on you and make sure you're okay, when really you could be at home on your own, going home the same day and avoiding that. So it created this idea to say, okay, hey, these people are a target. They're stealing money from you. Like, there's some animosity there. And they're also not following the check-in procedures, that this will give data that you can use, that they're checking in appropriately, so that you can show this to whomever ever asks if this comes up, that your facility is following these credentialing guidelines, in addition to the other credentialing companies that you have to sign up for. So it's a redundant process that I think is just sold, that the reps are scary. This is a chance to kind of stick them, to make them wear a clown suit. And really it brings no value add to the cases, to the actual patient care, and just creates sort of an otherness or second class citizen model.
It's funny. We run like in our distributorship, we have a few reps, and we calculated how much we spend every year for all of our reps, per rep rather, in credentialing fees. And it was about $1,100 per rep in credentialing fees, because every hospital. So initially it was start out as rep tracks, right? IntelliCentrics rep tracks was kind of the first credentialing service. Then out comes, simpler GHX, which again, I'm fine with that. If you want to track what you think makes the hospital safer going in and out, making sure everyone has their TB negative or had a low TB risk.
You should ask me when the last time I had a TB test was.
Hey,
it was before COVID. So, and I'm the one who's touching the patient, breathing on them, and doing all the work on top of the patient. Like, I realize that I'm not necessarily in areas of high TB causes, but there's the double standard for you right there. Is, I sign a form that says I haven't been around people with TB, and then I'm good.
That is crazy to me, because we have to get a TB test every year, and it takes 2 days. And the funny thing about it is, like, when you go into the PACU after operating on the patient, or the patient goes to the PACU rather, how many of their family had TB tests? How many of, that I've seen little kids running around without their shoes on in the PACU. And I'm like, you're worried about me in this, the person who's in the corner directing from afar.
But it's crazy. They do that, and then the who's testing the family, what exposure they have. They're not forced to wear these same things either. And then you hear a story that if you cross this line to use the bathroom that you have to use, because you're not allowed to use the bathroom by everybody else uses, then you go outside and you have to use that bathroom. Now you got to check in again because you crossed that line, which is ridiculous. But I'll cross that line and go talk to the patient's family who's out in the waiting room multiple times a day. I'm doing 10 cases a day. So if I go out there and chat with them, come back in, I'm not changing my scrubs. I'm not like every single case changing that stuff. The only time I change my scrubs is if it's grossly contaminated with, a strangely messy case, or it's a harder case and I'm sweating. So I just all right, I'm just gonna throw on a fresh pair of scrubs and go talk to the family so they don't know this was a hard case.
But statistically speaking, that shouldn't matter, right? Because most of the infections come from the patient themselves. So I overheard you having a conversation with someone from Rep Scrubs. I'm sure obviously you're on their radar because you brought it up as being the cash grab that it is. Who were you talking to on Rep Scrubs?
So I was talking to Jeff Fewer and Chris Eagles, who are apparently the CEO and then the boss of the CEO for Rep Scrubs, and sort of getting their side of things from the questions I had posed online last week about like, hey, like Jeff had kind of been ignoring me and after offering to talk with me, and so I was like, all right, well, if you're ignoring me, I'm going to point this out and then ask the questions I want to ask, and kind of see what their take is on it. So it was an interesting conversation.
So, what were the initial when you went into the conversation? Was there anything? I'll kind of go 10,000 foot view. Was there anything in that conversation or points they made about it that you're like, oh, that's actually a really, really good point and makes this more necessary than it really is, or makes or increases its necessity in my mind for it?
I mean, actually, they said the opposite. Like they sort of said the only reason that they exist is because if reps would go in, check in every time they come to a facility, and not come in scrubs and or take scrubs, to increase the laundry fees, which I can't imagine any hospital facility is going to be negligible at best. And I'm not paying for my own scrubs either, so this is a little bit of a convenient factor to pick on somebody who supposedly is making money on the case to say they need to pay extra money to do that. But they say their only role is to facilitate the check-in and make sure that you checked in to the other credentialing company and facility. So if reps check into those things and they don't need to have this verification and data center by their own admission, they would go away. So while I'm encouraging surgeons to speak out against this because I think it's a demeaning attire and a ridiculous policy, and that these companies have sort of scattered and popped up because you have to sign up with each company because you cover multiple different hospitals, and it seems like there's not a lot of overlap in certain areas where one vendor credentialing company will cover multiple hospitals in the same area, almost as if they drew it on a map that way to say, well, here's my one here, here's your one there, here's your one there. Yeah, prove collusion that way, but it's a little convenient that they're all sort of scattered around that way, so that each company gets their $500-$600 from each of the reps that cover that area. But if the reps would check in, do that, have a conversation with their surgeon support with the staff that they work with on a daily basis, usually, I think they would go away.
Interesting. So, do you think they will actually go away, or do you think that some overzealous material management, supply chain, mall cops are kind of keeping them in there?
I think that's definitely who's keeping them in there and thinking that they're like, oh, hey, middle management, I get to have some power over somebody. I hear these terrible stories of somebody who's like there for childbirth and they're getting harassed because they didn't check in.
A rep
So
that's
a
having
rep,
a
a
kid.
rep that's having a kid, a rep that's having a medical procedure, a rep that's having surgery, a rep that just had a child, and they're being harassed by these middle managers or the people who are like, well, you didn't check in. What's going on? Why aren't you in your scrubs? Why are you wearing civilian clothes in a place where it's not uncommon to go as a civilian to get healthcare, which is the entire purpose of those buildings is to provide healthcare. And so it just creates this environment of kind of tattletaling, or where you're going to empower people who probably don't need the power and don't deserve the power. And they're going to try to flex on people that they think that they should be able to boss around. It's unfortunate.
At 100%. I mean, we see the mall cops in multiple facilities, kind of cracking the whip over a kingdom that they get a lord over, right? Um, so what were some other points that he brought what are some other points that you brought up to Chris and Jeff that you thought were even more condemning to them?
I mean, I think that they acknowledge that there's no infection benefit to decreasing infection in the OR from these materials. So
Wait, they acknowledge that there's no
they
added
acknowledge that
benefit.
there's no added benefit to reducing infections. So that whole thing has been debunked from that aspect of things. They're claiming that there's no sharing of profits with the hospitals or anything like that, but they also didn't divulge their contracts that I asked. It's like, okay, well, if we're doing transparency, you want to see what this looks like. Um, and then potentially the most interesting thing was at the end of the conversation, I was about ready to call it a conversation, and they brought up the Google review thing and claimed that that they didn't have any of their employees put up Google reviews on their own site, even though we have screenshots showing their employee when they started, when they left their review, 2 different employees for sure. And it's really weird. It's all in a 7 or 8 month ago time frame that all these reviews came out that were very glowing and positive, which is about the time that they were sort of coordinating with GHX to sort of have this merger aspect of that they're now moving forward with this year. So it's a very strange timing. And I understand, like, if patients will have like an internal review thing where patients will say something nice, we'll be like, hey, you want to go to Google and put that up there? But I think it's disingenuous to take people who aren't your customers, because it seems like the customers are the hospitals, where the reps are the people who are just paying the bill. I don't think they treat the reps as customers. I don't think they view the reps as customers. I think they view their customers as the facility. And so the other thing is, last week we had it's like, hey, you guys should go and like let people know your opinion. Are you considered the customers for this business? And they said, oh, well, we're not going and taking those reviews down, even though I had a dozen people tell me they went on and left reviews. But they did admit that all of their sort of marketing or monitoring of internet use by a third party company, and that maybe they flagged these reviews as fraudulent, and sort of throwing up the Google terms and conditions of how you're supposed to leave a review, to say that that they weren't legitimate reviews that were left, is what the insinuation was, that they were able to flag them and have them removed through a third party because they weren't legitimate reviews, which is interesting.
So we didn't do it, but the company that we contracted with may have done it.
Correct. Yes. There was the look on their faces was like, well, can you tell me that this third party didn't do that? Silence. Like, right. Well, and then they wouldn't tell me the name of the third party. I'm sure there's multiple different iterations of people who can kind of monitor your internet usage and your reputation online, to do that. And I've gone online, I've looked at myself. There are some unhappy patients who have stated things, and if they have their right to put those up there. And I don't go and try to take them down or do anything like that unless it's something that doesn't make any sense or has nothing to do with like patient care. So if it's somebody that that we've never seen in our clinic that's leaving a review on our site, like I have had an unhappy rep who I'd never met before in my life who went on and disparaged me online, and I called him out on it to his company and to him, and the review got taken down.
And you started using them right away, right?
Exactly. I started using them. Yeah, that's
man. I've been using the wrong method, I guess, in trying to sell stuff.
So I mean, the reviews are there. The idea is to try to get as many as you can to try to do that. And I'm sure that there are multiple different companies that try to goose their reviews or to try to massage things or to make sure that people who are happy are posting reviews. Because let's be honest, happy patients aren't necessarily going online and saying anything about it. But unhappy patients will definitely find you and tell people about it. And so now we sort of try to encourage the people who are happier to go and post, and it sort of helps to balance that out. But those people are not my employees, and I'm not paying them to go and post any reviews. And so that's where I think the line comes in. It's like, it's okay to like encourage your customers to leave positive reviews, but you got to accept the good with the bad. And if you don't consider the reps your customers who you're taking the money from, I think that's a problem.
See, no, the real problem is you just got to get the name of that third party agency that
that did not seem like something they were going to share. That was
the interesting thing is I kind of looked up some of these reviews, and they're positive reviews. It's hilarious. They engage with. They're like, oh, Rick R from wherever leaves this glowing review of how he feels safer wearing these and how the convenience of not having to change into pre-laundered scrubs, but getting a fresh set every time. And then underneath it, it's right away someone from Rep Scrubs or Rep Scrubs owner saying, hey, Rick, thanks for the review. We really look forward to partnering with more reps like you. And it's very clear that if you can't see obviously the person's last name, there's no identifiable information. I'd be willing to bet if you went and actually looked this person up, they're probably not a rep.
No, that's for sure. They're definitely not reps. They're not the people who are actually using the things on a day-to-day basis. And I understand that they have this consideration that they consider the facility their partner, and there probably are some facilities that are thrilled with how this is going and what this looks like. But just because you can measure a metric doesn't mean it's the right metric, and just because somebody's happy about something doesn't mean it's the right thing. And so like we actually went through, you can find their LinkedIn profiles matching their names to their Google reviews for at least two of their employees. And so when initially stated that they don't do that, and I pointed out, I have proof that you did that, like not that you two encouraged it, but your company did that. They came up with a bunch of excuses to try to say that that didn't occur.
Well, it was interesting. All the like most of the ones, the vast majority of the ones I looked at where they were positive and then they were responding were from 7 to 9 months ago.
Yeah, 7 to 8 months,
Yeah.
which is very odd timing to have a plethora
Influx.
of positive reviews at that point, and then to try to block other ones from a third party site. Like maybe I need to find the third party site and get rid of the unhappy patients. I need to
Telling
work
you,
harder with that.
if it was a more friendly conversation you'd have had with them, you might have been able to get that out of them.
I tried to be friendly. I mean, I tried to keep an open mind. Like I wanted to hear their answers to these things, and so I went through the questions I had. I went through a couple of questions other people had posted about data and about what the material's made out of and what their accommodations are for allergies and stuff. I'm trying to dig into it and get their side. I'm trying to be open minded to hear what they have to say, and maybe there was some groundbreaking thing where this was ultra necessary to be able to do that. And even they kind of admit they're like, well, there's like a problem with how reps are checking into this, and it helps with that. It's like, is this really the best way to do that? You know, I think the reps now should be empowered to take it on themselves to be like, hey, I'm checking into the system that you also have me paying into. And we understand this, but the hospitals also keep track of everybody who's in the room. Like that's all included in the record. So they already know who's at the hospital or who's checking in or what's doing that.
But do
So it's
they?
a little redundant.
Is there a spot when people check in that, oh, this is, uh, you know, Nurse Susie just walked in and she verifies that these are new scrubs that she wore walking in.
Oh yeah, no, there was no talk of how anybody else needs to verify that they're wearing new scrubs. I've been asking, like, well, I'm the one who's closest to the patient. Should I be verifying that I wore new scrubs? Like, I went to my kids and read a story to him, and after in the middle of cases because it was the one day I could do it, so I did 4 cases, change out my scrubs, go to school, read a story to him, come back, change into the scrubs, get back in there. But nobody's verifying that that occurred. Nobody's checking to make sure that that happened. I think that there's sort of a seed or a level of distrust that's disappointing. It's like assuming the worst because yeah, there are bad apples and everything. There's bad apple surgeons too. But to assume every rep is terrible because they've had a couple of bad experiences with some reps who probably aren't even working in this business anymore, is hard to sort of paint everyone with that broad brush. And I don't think it's fair.
It, it's interesting. I looked up Jeff Fuhrer. How do you say Fury?
I
Is
don't
that
know
it?
how to say it.
I don't want to be like,
Fuhrer.
oh, the Fuhrer, the Fuhrer of rep scrubs.
I didn't say that for the record.
Jeff Fuhrer. I think that's
I think that's how you say
F-E-U-R.
it,
Yeah,
yeah.
Jeff Fuhrer. I looked up his LinkedIn and saw that he was with Stryker because I overheard that part where he's like, I was a rep. I carried the bag. He was with Stryker for 24 years, starting back in the early 90s, and was in endoscopy. And he was a manager for most of that time. So he's mid-level management. How often? So you talked about what's your favorite rep's name? You use the most,
I mean, we use
or not favorite? Sorry, give me a rep that's not your favorite in any specific time. What's his name?
Yeah, these are my children. I can't pick favorites. Let's go. So, I mean, Robbie's there the most of the time right
Okay,
now. So.
Robbie. How often has Robbie's mid-level manager boss covered a case of yours?
Less than a half dozen, I'm sure.
In how many years?
At least the last 2 or 3.
Yeah,
And before
right.
that, it was like none. Yeah.
In general, mid-level management doesn't cover cases. They're not in the hospital. So when I looked at Jeff Fuhrer's LinkedIn, the vast majority of the 24 years he was at Stryker was mid-level management. So the problem he identified was one he was so disconnected from that made me question, like, is this really a problem? Or do you see a company that you may think is profitable and has a lot of money and kind of doing a shakedown?
I mean, it's interesting. He also said that like the president of Stryker like supported him and invested in the company to do that, which I think is interesting. And would probably raise some eyebrows around the Stryker rep community who's been fairly vocal about this. To know that this is the solution to sort of the problem that they came up with. And I agree. If you're a middle manager, you're not on the ground. You don't know exactly what's going on. And it's not the 90s anymore. Like, it's not the Wild West. There was no group purchasing organizations. I mean, I'm sure in the 90s it was show up and if you opened your stuff first, you got to use your stuff. It was throwing elbows and cutting blue wrap on somebody else's stuff. So it was not sterile. So they had to use yours or any sort of underhanded, stories that you hear. I mean, I used to hear that the reps would scrub into the case to like help with things like back in the 80s, like, forever ago. And so now definitely none of that stuff is happening. And really the people on the ground don't have much influence over what the pricing is anyway. And so, they're there to help make sure the people on the ground want the cases to go well. They want surgeon to be happy. They want the patient to be happy. They want everybody in the room to be happy. They want it to be a great experience and they want to help facilitate that. And it's their equipment that they're using, but if they don't make it a great experience, then that's when it opens the door for things to switch. So they're not focused so much on selling. They want to make sure that everything is going smoothly and the patients are.
It is incredible how much of our training, at least in spine, and I'm sure it's the same in ortho, in training our reps, the onus of the whole room is put on them to a degree, right? Hey, for largely you are locked into place. You can't move outside of this small bubble once you're scrubbed in. Make sure everything else around there functions to support that surgeon doing that case. And sometimes I feel like the hospitals don't see it that way.
No, and that's where the disconnect comes in. Because I mean, the people who don't see it that way aren't in the ORs. Like they're not in there watching what's going on. They're not in here seeing how it all works together. Like we have a very coordinated team that's been the same team for years at where I'm at, and so everybody knows what's going on, and so it can be kind of a very relaxed thing. Everybody's kind of keeping track, and if somebody sees something that's different or that's off, they can kind of speak up about it and say, okay, hey, that's not quite the right idea. And then for somebody new, they can kind of feel like they're bowling with bumpers. That's like, hey, okay, I have some safety nets. Like these guys will kind of help point me in the right direction. They'll show me the next tools to use. They'll make sure I have everything set up appropriately, so that everything flows as smooth as it does if you have the A team. So you can have the A- team and still be great, still give great results because everybody knows what's going on and the rep can kind of be the glue to hold things together.
Do you see a repless model working anywhere?
It didn't work in Loma Linda.
Is that where they tried it?
They were very loud about that in Loma Linda, how they were going to go repless and they're going to save their 5% on their costs, by trying to manage their own stuff. But that's where the disconnect comes in if you don't understand the actual job. Like it's not just making sure you have the implants there and opening a box to say, oh, you want this size? Okay, here you go. There's so much more to it to get this organized. One of my buddies from Albuquerque now lives in Phoenix was relaying a story where he had to collect all the trauma stuff for a hospital there that didn't have any of the trauma sets to do a pelvic surgery on for a patient. And he like stayed up at the airport, grabbed all the stuff, brought it in the middle of the night to make sure it got turned over in time to start the case on time, get everything there and get that together. And then the hospital was like, well, we don't have any of this stuff on contract. It's like, well, yeah, you don't have any pelvic fracture stuff on contract. Like, but the surgeon wanted this, we got it taken care of, and the patient got taken care of, and the patient got fixed. So like, I'm sure that they like worked some deal to make sure this turned out okay and wasn't like some huge cost center. But that's the type of dedication and trying to go that the C-suite people don't see. They just see, oh, this costs us this much money. Oh, this is what we're paying in implants. This is what we're paying this cost. And, they're not getting their pay cut as much. So surgeons, doctors are getting a pay cut at 2.9%, almost 5% when they add in the RVU stuff. But the hospitals are getting a bump in that. So the hospitals are getting plus 2.9%. And that's not a dollar for dollar thing because they're getting paid 10 times more than we're getting paid. So for the same, for the case. So they're getting paid way more on that side. So they got a much bigger bump than we got a decrease. And then the insurance companies, like the Medicare Advantage people, are getting a 5% bump. And all they're doing is telling people don't do stuff. Like they're just obstructionists to try to make sure patients don't get care because they get a block of money for everybody. And the less care you get, the more money you keep. And so it's a huge revenue generator for the insurance companies to sign people up to Medicare Advantage and then not have them get healthcare.
So in your experience and in your perspective, what is the functional way forward for healthcare in America?
Honestly, it's crazy as it sounds, but some level of price transparency, because right now everything is sort of opaque and you don't know what anything actually costs. So, and the reason that it became that is because they used to be like, oh, here's what the usual and customary price is for stuff. And then insurance companies were like, oh, well, we want to pay you. We have all these people that are going to need that. We want a discount on that. And then the hospital was like, oh, well, that's not the thing. Now we have this magic charge master, which is where your aspirin costs $10 a pill instead of 1 cent that it actually costs to make. And so everything's inflated. And then now they get their discount to the insurance companies, where really the insurance companies are potentially paying more for the surgeries than if you did cash pay, because it's actually easier to work with that. But neither the hospital nor the insurance company wants the public to know that. So some level of price transparency needs to be there to say, hey, here's what stuff costs. Here's, if you do insurance, here's what it actually would save you if you did this, or not save you anything. And here's what it costs for, cash pay, or what this looks like to not have the insurance company involved. There's really weird stuff you get into pharmacy about, like, what a pharmacist can or can't tell you once you tell them you have insurance. Like, they can't. There's some certain like gag orders where they will like say, if you say, oh, I'm going to pay cash for this, it's one price, and if you say, oh wait, I have my insurance card, then suddenly it's another price. And like sometimes your out of pocket for the covered medicine is higher than your actual cash pay would have been just to pay cash for it.
So everyone, when you go to the pharmacy, should ask or say, "Hey, I'm going to pay cash for this," and then see what that price is first.
See what that price is like. I would say, yeah, go like, hey, do you have are you under a gag order for some of this stuff? Like, it's weird. These pharmacy benefit managers, there's so many people who have their hand in medicine and are trying to like just get their cut of things that don't participate in patient care or making people better, is shockingly disappointing. So the biggest thing, which is surprising, that I would agree, on this with people, is that you need to know what the price is. Like, you don't go to a hotel and say, oh yeah, and I'll find out in the morning what this costs. Like, you know what the price is when you reserve it, know what you're going to be paying. And you can get a ballpark of that beforehand, but it then varies based on what your insurance carrier is, or if it's Medicare, or it's private insurance, or if it's cash pay. Like, the price is just so flexible. And it's a total game. So I think if you de-gamified it and said, okay, here's everybody's, put your price up, then it also lets you comparison shop. So then you actually have some power of the market to be like, hey, why is this cost this much here? Is it worth it to go there? And you want to go there? Great. Is it not worth it to go there? Maybe it's not worth it to go there, and you can get the same thing at a more reasonable cost. And that's really going to drive, I think, savings, and get rid of the middlemen who have their hand out in the pocket and are kind of fleecing everything the way through.
It is incredible. So we actually we own a marketing firm, and that's where we're shooting this at, is at Darkwater Consulting. But we've been working for years now on helping surgeons build their practice out. And what is really interesting that we found is that the surgeons that commit to a cash pay commercial practice and actually drop government insurance, those government insured patients will still pay a cash price just to have the surgery done and get better quality care in a better facility for not that high out of pocket. How many people perceive that they can't afford healthcare, but they drive around a $30,000 car, right? So there is a shift in the perspective of some of these patients. But if you look at it, a lot of them understand the value of good healthcare and will actually pay it. And if they are government insured, Medicare, Medicaid, they're not paying anything out of pocket anyway. But then if you go to like commercial, it's interesting about the pharmacy, what you're talking about, that if you just ask a simple question, what is this if I pay cash, before they know if you have insurance or not.
Yeah, it's amazing to do little tricks and stuff to kind of figure that out. And I mean, there's a lot of people who are getting to the point where if they're going to continue to cut the government reimbursement for things, and I don't want to. I mean, my practice is largely Medicare. They're great patients to take care of. Like, I still kind of believe in that sort of system to do that. But it's getting hard to justify the amount that I get paid, that I pay for overhead, that I pay in taxes, to then say, okay, it says that I'm getting paid $1,200 for the surgery, but half of that goes to overhead and another half goes to Uncle Sam. So now I'm getting $300 for this. And if anything bad happens, I can lose my house.
In 90 days too. That's the other thing.
Anything
you have a 90
in 90 days. Well, and yeah, that's the thing. It's not just covering the surgery that takes, less than an hour to do that. And it's like, oh, you're getting $3 an hour. It's like, sort of, but it's 91 days. So it's 1 day before and 90 days after. So to cover whatever happens, and whatever happens then becomes my fault. So you get these value-based cares or these sort of bundled payments or something like that. Then they're trying to risk shift everything onto the surgeons who already aren't getting paid all that much, to say, oh, well, if, so-and-so has a problem, that was obviously from the surgery and that's your fault. And so then that you get this is what it should cost. Anything less than that, you can get potential benefit from. But if in general, everything is higher than that, then you owe us money for making it be higher than that.
So how does a private practice orthopedic surgeon shift from the risk of that to a heavy commercial cash pay? I'm legitimately asking. I don't know.
I mean, that's a good question. That's where you get to sort of get that point. I think there's a few people I know in the area that have done that, and other places that, that's your volume decreases significantly, but if you're getting paid 5 times as much, doing 20% of the work for each of those cases, it pencils out to about what you were bringing in the first place. But then you have more time for your family and more time for anything else that you want to do. And so it gets to the point where that's potentially how this is going to happen. There's going to be people who are good enough to say, okay, people will still come to me to have their surgery. I don't need to chase volume and do this and try to help as many people as I can. Or there's going to be people who aren't, and they're going to be mainly hospital employed, who's going to say, oh, well, you have to do this no matter what because you take any payer. And so it's going to be almost a two-tiered system, which is similar probably what they have in like, England or Europe, where they have
Australia, they have that too.
yeah, similar
Public and
sort of
private
public and
hospitals.
private
Yeah.
stuff, where there's, okay, if you want to be public and go through this process, and that's fine. You just have to wait your turn. But the private stuff's going to get done quicker and get done by surgeons who are potentially better. There's probably very good surgeons who would never opt out of these things. There's very good surgeons who are employed by hospitals, but in a private practice, you need to keep busy enough, but then you also need to have ancillary streams of income. So, in medical school, I think they purposely don't teach you any business. So there's no business classes. I've never taken a business class. I have ownership in like 9 businesses. So the practice, 2 different surgery centers, 2 real estate buildings. I have my own consulting company. I have other outside consulting that I do for this, but then we also have like MRI and X-ray and PT and the surgery centers. We have an MSO that sort of helps with sort of staffing and all these different places and entities. And so you really have to get a crash course in business. And then it can be daunting to do that. So that's why I think initially when people are coming out, they like the idea of a hospital employed because it's a guarantee and hey, this is what you're going to get. But I sort of did that. My first year was the equivalent of California hospital employed. And they were wanting to give me a decrease in my salary, even though I was outperforming their expectations, because I was outperforming their expectations. They thought I was going to be an outlier and didn't want to pay that much. And I was like, so I'm doing good, but you want to pay me less because I'm doing good. And it's crazy. So then if you go to private practice, I took like a 60-70% pay cut when I moved to Colorado. But I bet on myself. I was like, okay, I know I can get this busy. I know I can do this. And it was a place I wanted to live more. So I wanted to live here. I want to live close to the actual mountains and be in a place where I felt more at home. But I had to, then you build up your practice that way. There's no guarantee. There's a lot more risk, but the potential upside is better and you can be more stable because you're diversified in all these businesses that do sort of run on the work. But instead of, the hospital taking all the benefit, you're sharing that with your partners and supporting all your staff. And so you can afford the overhead because you have these ancillary things that help support that.
But I mean, even though, and like, you're kind of a rarity in that most surgeons aren't built that way to look for the business opportunities to be able to have ancillary streams of income. So they're still able to give great patient care and really still also just focus on the patient. Most aren't built that way. And even with an entrepreneurial mind like that, you still have some very big limitations in what you're allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do. The fact that you guys, that surgeons, that physicians cannot have ownership in hospitals is absolutely crazy to me.
There's one person at this table that can have ownership in a hospital, and it's not me. So you could own a hospital, but I can't own a hospital. It's crazy.
It's funny. So there are some hospitals where they were grandfathered in and the surgeons were grandfathered in. And we've actually been in some of those hospitals and have watched at the level of attention that goes into every detail, into the ensuring that there's a level of waste that is appropriate, right? So like there is going to be waste, but it's not going to be a bloated C-suite. I didn't see anyone walking around with bow ties, taking pictures, anything like that. Everyone was there to work. One of them that I was at, a surgeon was even helping turn over the room because there was a certain time limit they put on how fast those room turnovers were. It was better care when the surgeon had say in how it was ran.
If you have skin in the game, you're going to participate better. So I love the patients at the VA, but the system is terrible. Like it is disappointing how they treat the veterans. And, I really was excited when they had some of these programs where the veterans could come and see us because then we could take care of some of the veterans and do that. But I remember in training, it was like, if you did 2 joint replacements in a day, buddy, that was the day. Like,
In the VA system.
in the VA system. And we're doing 10 on a Wednesday usually, like, to do that. And we're doing it, and that's at a hospital facility where we've dialed it in and got it fast. But that's because I'm pushing it. Like, no one else is saying you have to do this. It's I'm telling them this is how you do it. And so if you have skin in the game and can do that and get the potential upside, and this is your butt on the line, then you make it work and run efficiently and you make it run better. And there is definitely across the board, physician-owned hospitals perform better than non-physician-owned hospitals, because then you can compare that data all across the country. It's unanimous that the care is better at those facilities.
I think it'd be pretty hard to make an argument that the VA has the best care. And it's not even necessarily, I'm not saying that
There
against
are
the
great
physicians.
committed physicians there.
I'm
I
saying the
totally get
system.
it. Just the system
The
is
system.
terrible.
It's terrible. Yeah. Well, again, thanks for coming on. Thanks for bringing out this coffee. I definitely love the coffee ride in Boulder. Your group, Boulder Center for Orthopaedics, and where's it based?
So we're in the east side of Boulder on Pearl Parkway, is the Boulder office. Then there's another office in Broomfield over on Highway 7 and I-25. So I don't see patients there. I see patients in Boulder, but I operate at both the surgery centers. And that's where we do most of our work.
Awesome. Well, yeah, if I have any hips, knee problems that I hope I never see you
Hopefully
in
that's
that
many,
way.
many
Yeah.
years down the road.
But man, I as a rep, I say thank you for giving somewhat of a voice to kind of the marginalized part of that area. And I'm not saying that it's not a great job. I love my job, but I appreciate whenever they're the surgeons like you that actually will kind of take a bit, like lift their head up, look around and be like, oh man, like who supports the support staff?
No, I think that it's important. And that's where I've, traveled all over the country, training people on how to do the surgeries and stuff that I do. And it's always the reps that are there, and they're not getting paid on these extra weekend times. And so they're dedicated to their job and they just want the patients to do well, the doctors to do well, the cases to go well. And they deserve just a level of professional respect that says, hey, we're part of the team. I don't need to be singled out, marginalized, made to dress differently just because we're not employed. Like, I'm not employed by the hospital and I don't have to do that. So I realize that doctor and rep is different, but at the end of the day, all of us just want the patients to get better.
Absolutely. Well, thanks again for coming down,
Thanks for having me.
and I appreciate it.
Great.
Awesome.